Cavanaugh's Corner. Today on the show, I'm going to be talking about the latest original film from Netflix, ironically enough. It's called Bright, and it stars Will Smith and Joel Edgerton, and it's actually directed by David Ayer, who did movies like End of Watch and, sadly, Suicide Squad. That was... I'm not big on that one. But he has had some pretty big movies under his belt, and he's also the writer of Training Day, ironically enough. Again, he does some pretty solid police films, but this is a different one. This is a movie about two LAPD officers. Will Smith is one of them, Joel Edgerton is the other. They're partners, and again, they're not the greatest of friends, and Joel Edgerton is an orc. Yes, orc as in, Lord of the Rings orc. The movie Bright takes place in kind of this alternate universe where there's actual magic and mythical creatures actually exist among normal men. So Joel Edgerton is an orc police officer. I think he's the first one, actually. And there's fairies. There's actually a cop that's in this movie that's part centaur, which I think is interesting. He's a centaur. I thought that was unbelievable. It's just in one shot, but there's elves. The elves are really the rich people. It's a very interesting film. Most of the story comes from the fact that Will Smith and Joel Edgerton stumble upon this crime scene where there's this elf that has been basically, obliterated, and there's a magic wand. They, of course, take the magic wand and are confronted by some corrupt police officers, and it all goes downhill from there. And the magic wand is really the MacGuffin of the story. It's kind of the object of desire that everyone wants in this world because you can make anything happen. However, if you touch the magic wand and you're not what they call a bright, where you get the title of the film from, a bright is someone who can actually control a magic wand. Mostly, they're only elves that can do this. I'm not going to go into any more detail here because I don't want to ruin the story. It is a very interesting story. It's very inventive, and it does do a really good job of world building. The plot itself is very, very, very plain Jane. There is a difference between the story and the plot. The story is the overall world of it. I think that's very interesting. But the plot itself is very mundane. It's basically just Will Smith and Joel Edgerton running away from these evil elves, evil gang members that are in the city, orcs. Everybody is basically after them after they get that wand. And most of the movie is just them trying to escape and get out of their situation. There's more to it than that, but again, I don't want to give it away. And I think there's also some very interesting social commentary in this film as well. That I think it's interesting, but there are parts of it that I'm not crazy about. There is a whole section at the beginning where we're introduced to Will Smith's daughter, and that really doesn't go anywhere. The daughter is in the first 15 minutes of the film and then is never seen again. And I think that was something that this movie could have done a little better, but again, it's a lot to take in about 2 hours. There's a lot of world building that has to be done, and I can understand why they didn't really go back to that. One thing I do have to say that I liked about the film is that Will Smith and Joel Edgerton are outstanding in this, and they really do make a good pair. I think their chemistry in this is wonderful. I love their chemistry in this. Will Smith gives one of his best performances in a long time in this, and that's really saying something. I thought he was very good in this, almost hearkening back to the days of like the original Bad Boys, the first Men in Black. I think his comedic timing in this is really good. However, I think the movie does suffer from a very, I don't want to say predictable plot, but you can kind of see where it's going in certain parts. There's one very particular scene in the movie that has an extremely emotional moment. and then it's instantly reversed, like literally seconds later. And I think that could have been done a little bit better. Again, I don't want to ruin anything for anybody, but if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. However, there is some extremely funny dialogue between Will Smith and Joel Edgerton. I think their characters in the movie are pretty well written. Joel Edgerton especially, I think his character is very interesting because he's a guy that is just trying to do the right thing. His heart is true. And I think that is the main thing about his character in this movie that I like, that his heart is very pure. And I love seeing characters like that in movies. Even though he makes some really bad choices in this film, I think that seeing his character kind of grow as the movie goes on and overall be the source of most of the comedy through this film, I think is really interesting. I really liked his character. The action in the movie is pretty well done. David Ayer is a pretty good action director, but overall I thought the action had a few too many scenes where there was like shaky cam. Not crazy about scenes that could have been shot in a clear way that they have to shoot in like the shaky fashion. I really don't like that. There were a couple scenes in this that they did that with. I thought there was a pretty good car chase scene that I really liked, had a pretty good punchline at the end of it. Made me laugh a few times, genuinely. But overall, I thought the action in the film was, it was pretty professionally done. I liked it. For a Netflix movie, I was pleasantly surprised. One thing about the movie that I really did not like was Noomi Rapace's performance in this. Noomi Rapace is the main villain of the picture, and she's basically sleepwalking through the movie. She is the evil elf that is coming after her wand. And man, she's terrible in this. She is really terrible in this. Most of her dialogue is in Elfish, which is gibberish with subtitles. I guess they wrote the language specifically for the movie, which I thought was interesting. But overall, I really didn't like her performance in this. She's a robot. And I know she's supposed to be this really well-trained, fighting elf, but I really didn't like her character at all. I thought it left a lot to be desired. And I think if she was more of a... she's very menacing, but they really dialed it to 11 with the evil factor in her, and I really didn't care. I didn't care about her character at all. There's one scene where it's implied that she does harm to an infant, and I really, really didn't think that was necessary. I thought that was absolutely terrible, and I don't know. I thought that left a lot to be desired. I don't know. It could have been cut out, honestly. Overall, I thought the main problem with the movie is that it tries too hard to be nasty. And David Ayer does this a lot with his films, where I feel like they try too hard to be nasty, meaning like very gross in terms of violence, very bloody, and the language in this is off the charts, man. This is a hard R in terms of bad language. There's an F-bomb, probably every couple seconds in this. It's pretty rough. I have nothing against bad language in movies. I think it can be well done if done properly. Quentin Tarantino has pretty much become the master of that in terms of using bad language in a proper way, and if there is a proper way. But this movie, Will Smith really gets to let loose with the F-bombs in this. It's been a while since he's been able to do that in a movie, but he really is all the way with the F-bombs in this, and it almost becomes comical in a good way. In a funny way, it's actually kind of nice to see Will Smith drop a few F-bombs here and there, but it really pushes the limit in this. Overall, I thought Bright was an entertaining movie for a Netflix movie. It's not worth signing up for Netflix for, but it's definitely worth a watch. It's a little long at 2 hours. I think it could have been about 10-15 minutes shorter, but overall, I thought Will Smith and Joel Edgerton make a great pair. I thought the plot, even though it was very plain Jane, I thought the world building the story did was interesting. I thought the social commentary was interesting as well. and I enjoyed it. I thought it was a serviceable action movie with some really interesting magic elements, and I'm giving Bright a 3 out of 5. I thought it was worth the watch, but definitely not worth signing up for Netflix for. Anyway, I'm Andrew Cavanaugh. Thanks for coming back to the channel today. If you like this video, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Take it easy.